We have an economic and political crisis in this country. We need to develop a political movement prepared to take on and defeat a ruling class whose greed is destroying our nation.
Tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests.
Democratic socialism means that we must create an economy that works for all, not just the very wealthy.
The reason why you say that is because it is so hard for people to get out of the notion that life is a zero-sum game. They think if one man benefits, another must lose. But in a free market, both people can benefit.
If somebody works 40 hours a week, that person should not be living in poverty.
In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade.
We must raise the minimum wage to a living wage.
The minimum wage law is a law requiring employers to discriminate against low-skilled people. That's not the way anybody will describe it, but that is in fact what it is.
It makes far more sense to me to put millions of people back to work, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure.
The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? You know, I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us. Well, I don't even trust you to do that.
American society.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt about his sincerity, but I think sincerity is a much overrated virtue. What troubles me about him is that he wants to run my life for me instead of letting me run my life.
Here's a quotation from Bernie Sanders, the Vermont senator who nearly won the Democratic presidential nomination. Quote, quoting Bernie Sanders, "While there are some great corporations," this is the question of causation versus blame, "while there are some great corporations trying to do the right thing, in my view, and I say this very seriously, the greed of the billionaire class," the greed, this is not supposed to be funny, I say this very seriously, "the greed of the billionaire class, the greed of Wall Street is destroying the lives of millions of Americans," close quote. What do we make of that?
It's astonishing, but I think even more astonishing is how many people voted for Bernie Sanders at a time where in socialist Venezuela, people are starving. They're breaking into stores in their desperation to get some food. They're crossing the borders into other countries to stave off starvation. In a country that has one of the world's largest supplies of oil, that they've managed to do that in that country. And people are so utterly insulated from facts that the fact that Bernie Sanders paints a very beautiful picture is all that matters.
What would define your campaign?
Standing up to the billionaire class.
Billionaires, 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 billionaires.
I am not a billionaire.
Millionaires, 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 millionaires,
millionaires and billionaires at the same time.
millionaires and billionaires,
Millionaires and billionaires.
millionaires and billionaires, millionaires and billionaires, millionaire and billionaire, millionaires and billionaires, billionaires and millionaires, billionaires. Billionaire.
Billionaires, billionaire, billionaires.
Billionaires. Billionaire. 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 And billionaires. Just the billionaire class.
Billionaire class, billionaire class, billionaire class, billionaire class, billionaire class, billionaire class,
The billionaire class.
the billionaire class.
Billionaire class.
Millions of people who will tell the billionaire class,
Enough is enough.
You better get some billionaires, a small number of billionaires.
Dominated by billionaires.
The billionaires may be too powerful.
Billionaire. Billionaire. Billionaires.
Billionaire, billionaires, 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 a billionaire,
Billionaires.
billionaires, billionaires, multi-billionaires, billionaires, billionaires,
Billionaires. Billionaires. Billions of dollars. $5 billion. $20 billion.
over $100 billion.
From a handful of billionaires. billionaires,
Billionaires, billionaires, billionaires, billionaires.
Billionaires.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what you can do for your country. Ask what your country can do for you.
But in history, though, communism has killed over 100 million people through China,
I'm not discounting that.
Stalin,
I'm not discounting that.
I'm not discounting that communism killed 100 million people. I just decided to wear a giant fucking flag in public that represents exactly that.
Told me the story about the two fellows in the Soviet Union were walking down the street, and the one of them says, "Have we really achieved full communism? Is this it? Is this now full communism?" And the other one said, "Oh, hell no, things are going to get a lot worse." Said that Castro was making a speech to a large assembly, and he was going on at great length, and then a voice out in the crowd said, "Peanuts, popcorn, Cracker Jack." And he went on speaking, and again the voice said, "Peanuts, popcorn, Cracker Jack." And about the fourth time this happened, he stopped in his regular speech, and he said, the next time he says that, he says, "I'm going to find out who he is and kick him all the way to Miami." And everybody in the crowd said, "Peanuts, popcorn, Cracker Jack." In the Soviet Union, who went out to one of those state collective farms, grabbed the first worker he came to, said, "How are the crops?" "Oh," he said, "the crops never been better, just wonderful." He said, "How about potatoes?" "Oh," he said, "Comrade Commissar, if we could put the potatoes in one pile, they would reach the foot of God." And the commissar said, "This is the Soviet Union. There is no God." He said, "That's all right. There are no potatoes."
Which was, again, Judy Woodruff asking Sanders, the little mini Lenin, about how big the government would be for all of the freebies he's promising in clip number 5.
My question is, how big would government be? Would there be any limit on the size and role of government?
Of course there will be a limit. But when today you have massive levels of income and wealth inequality, when the middle class is disappearing, you have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. Yes, in my
get
view,
off it already, you liar, you.
Has a moral responsibility to play a vital role in making sure that all of our people have a decent standard of living.
We have the highest standard of living in the world. More people don't work than any other place on earth. And he's still talking like it's 1930 and there's soup kitchens and child labor in a factory. Where is this idiot from? How'd they dig this creep up? Answer. It's quite simple. The people are stupid. Did you know that the millennial so-called generation, the drug addicts who are raised on Adderall, Ritalin, and other drugs, who are stupid, they may look pretty and smart, they're morons. Millennials pick socialism over capitalism. These smiling morons don't even know what socialism is. Daniel, welcome. You're on the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please. What's your topic?
I'm just a Bernie supporter. Wanted to defend him a little bit with you. Streets, libraries, schools, police, firemen.
Wait, hold on. We don't have any of those things?
We have those things in our capitalist democracy that are technically socialist. Would you?
And so what's your point? So now you want to go 100% socialist with Bernie?
Well, no. Okay, so here's my point. If you call 911, only one service will bankrupt you in America. And most other countries solved this ages ago.
Sorry, I missed that point. If you call 911, what happens?
If the police show up, they're not going to bankrupt you. If the firefighters show up, they're not going to bankrupt you. But if
I don't know what is your point? I don't know what you're saying.
Just an ambulance, take you to the emergency.
Yeah, Daniel, could you please be a little more clear on what you're trying to say? You're a supporter of Bernie, and you're saying socialism is good. Is that what you're trying to argue?
I'm saying that we're already part socialist.
But I know that. I've said that for 20 years. We're 60 to 70% socialist already. And? So now you want to make it 100% socialist?
Well, I really view healthcare as a human right, and I don't know how a Christian could look at it as,
Here we go. Bleeding heart liberal. So you mean all billions of people on the earth have a right to come here and I have to pay for their care?
Well, I'm saying if you call yourself a Christian and...
Well, stop telling me what I call myself. You're trying to sell socialism on a national talk show. You're alleging that health care is a right. It's a right for who?
So Jesus cured...
Stop with your Jesus already. This is not a theological discussion. It's a political discussion. Somebody has to pay for that health care. So if an illegal alien from Guatemala comes here with tuberculosis, I have to pay for that health care when in the past my grandfather was stopped at Ellis Island. If anybody had a disease, they were sent home. Well, what kind of country is this? We are bankrupt, my friend. Eight 855-407-2882, John on WABC. Go ahead. You're on the Savage Nation. What's on your mind?
Dr. Savage, I just want to let you know that Michelle Obama's not doing anything wrong by telling...
Oh, you're letting me know? You mean you're giving me your false opinion? You're not telling me, you're not letting me know. You're giving me your commie opinion.
Nothing communist, because the communists never lied. It was the fascist Nazis who always lied and tried to have a revision.
The communists never lied? Tell that to the 100 million people killed by communism in the last century. Didn't you read that in your college textbook?
Go back and change history like the Nazis did.
What did I just say to you? Communism killed 100 million people in the last century. Are you aware of that or not?
Yeah, but I'm not a historical revisionist. This is revisionism.
Wait, just stop changing the subject. How many Cambodians died under the communist Pol Pot?
Nothing. He wasn't a communist. In fact, we supported him against the Vietnamese.
Wait, but you're twisting the truth again. He was a communist. Do you know who Pol Pot was?
He wasn't. We supported...
I just asked you a question. Hey, stupid. Listen, if you're going to play stupid with me, I'm clicking the button and you're going back into cyberspace. Tell me who Pol Pot was.
He was the head of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, who we supported against the Vietnamese.
I didn't ask you who we supported. I asked you who he was. Do you know how he became a communist? Yes or no?
No.
Well, I'm going to educate you, dummy, so you can take time out from your Occupy Wall Street mimeographing. He was a college teacher who went to Paris to study Marxism. He came back to Cambodia, and he introduced Marxism to Cambodia. Fast cut to 3 million human skulls. Do you remember that?
The killing fields, yes.
Oh, thanks for the call, you schmuck, you. Michelle.
When I take over in this country, the rich are going to pay their fair share. And not only will they pay their fair share, but I am certain that others will pay their fair share as well, especially those who have any money in anything they've achieved. They must pay their fair share, because nobody has earned anything in this country, except it was on the back of others. And so I think a minimum tax rate for those making more than $10,000 a year should be at least 98%, and I would make it graduated, so people should not say that I'm unfair. Anybody making more than $20,000 a year should pay 99%. Anybody making $50,000 up must pay 100% of their income as taxes. You said, how are they going to live if they pay 100% in taxes? My answer is simple. Let them live like the others live with nothing. Let them go on welfare, food stamps, let them see what it's like. I want fairness. I want equality in this society. And therefore, I think that fair taxes are the fairest way to go. And 100% is fair enough for anyone making over $50,000 a year. And as far as the millionaires and the billionaires, I tax them at 150%. So how are they going to live? Because they got plenty put away. They could sell their houses, they could sell the yachts, they could sell the cars, and they could empty the bank account. So 150% up to 10 million, 300% if you make more than $20 million, and then we'll have fairness in America. I'm Bernie Sanders, and I'm running as a communist.
Surprising because Sanders' economic planning would take power from individuals and give it to the state.
Young people are just not that alarmed about socialism. Across a number of different polls, we see that young people are the most supportive of socialism compared to older cohorts, and they're about as likely to say they like capitalism as socialism.
So are they dumb? Are you dumb? Are your friends dumb? Yes,
Part of it is young people don't know what the technical definition of socialism is. A recent poll asked people to use their own words to define it, and only 16% of millennials were able to do it. They grew up after the Cold War. They don't remember socialism in the context of the Soviet Union like older people do. For young people, socialism means Scandinavia. But that's something I think that needs to be corrected, is that Scandinavia is not socialist. The Prime Minister of Denmark even went after Bernie Sanders and said, stop calling us socialist. We are a free market economy, and in fact they are, and across a number of different economic indicators. Sweden, Norway, and Denmark actually outrank the United States on property rights freedom, the ease of starting a business. When they liberalized their markets like that, that actually
got rid of labor laws.
Yes. that actually that accommodates their large social welfare states. And that's what Bernie Sanders, he's talking about their large social welfare states. He's not acknowledging how they liberalized their economies in the 90s that actually helps pay for the social welfare state.
How many of you would consider voting for Bernie Sanders? No. No one here?
When government is planning either an industry or an entire economy, it tends to result in the same set of consequences, which are long lines, rationing, lower quality care, and less innovation. If you want less innovation, then we can embrace those systems. But if you want to have a cure for cancer, if you want to have a cure for HIV in the future, you have to have innovation, you have to have free markets, even in the healthcare system.
Your polling has found that millennials start to turn against socialism the more money they start to make.
That's exactly right. We found that as millennials started to make between $40,000 and $60,000 a year, their support for income redistribution flips, and their support for raising taxes to increase spending.
Makes it sound like it's all about selfishness.
Huge concern from parents and students in Brazil are that many teachers in school, they indoctrinate in socialism and Marxism instead of giving education. If this is the case in the United States as well, what to do about it?
Now, a lot of people are not learning about what happened in the Soviet Union when they had an experiment with socialism, or other countries that have experimented with socialism. Instead, we talk about socialism as if it's Scandinavia, and they're not even socialists. So let's talk about history, see what can we learn from those experiments. And they didn't go well. And I think we should be teaching
But your whole continent has experimented with socialism. It hasn't gone well, and they keep doing it.
They do. So, and we have to do something about it.
And a Russian arguing about their two countries, and the American said, look, in my country I can walk into the Oval Office, I can pound the president's desk and say, Mr. President, I don't like the way you're running our country. And the Russian said, I can do that. The American said, you can? He says, yes. I can go into the Kremlin, to the General Secretary's office, pound his desk and say, Mr. General Secretary, I don't like the way President Reagan's running his country.
But Bernie wants to take the people that are lowest, the poorest, hardest people that have it the hardest in this country, and bring them up, help them get college, give them a good...
Let's stop with it. Let's stop with your fairy tale. How is he going to pick them up? How does he do that?
With schools. College is going to be free. I mean, that should be done.
Wait, what do you mean by free? Who's going to pay for the teachers and the electricity and the school books and the security guards? Who's going to pay for it? What do you mean free? Who's paying for the colleges that Bernie the communist is offering? Who's paying for it?
Well, you know as well as I do that Bernie has laid out how he does pay for it.
Stop with Bernie already. I don't like the name Bernie. Tell me how this crackpot is going to pay for this free college.
With taxing on Wall Street, with the taxing of
With the taxing on Wall Street. What does that mean? What does taxing on Wall Street mean? Do you even know what you're talking about?
Okay, I may not be as informed as, a professional Wall Street Journal lawyer or whatever, but listen, I know...
But you ate it, but like a guppy in a fish tank, you ate it hook, line, and sinker. He dangled the worm, and like a guppy, you opened your mouth and you swallowed the hook. You didn't even think this through. What do you mean he's going to pay for it from Wall Street? What does that actually mean?
Well, look at the bankers that destroyed this country in 2008. That made this country...
Hold it. Which bankers? Name the bankers who were destroying this country.
I don't know their names.
Well, you don't know anything. You are the typical useful idiot that Lenin wrote about.
We could spend 6 hours talking about all of the problems that exist in this country.
Stop the tape. Imagine spending 6 hours with Bernie Sanders. I'd rather be waterboarded at Gitmo.
War is over. The growing gap between the rich and the poor. I can go on and on.
Stop the tape. Please don't go on and on. The rich and the poor gap. There we go with income inequality. And what this genius would never admit to is that income inequality is a necessary component in a free market system. You must have income inequality. That allows rich people to possibly become poorer, and poor people possibly to become rich, and everything in between. If you want income equality, Bernie, move to North Korea, please. There is no way that in a general election that this guy can be elected because he's a radical, socialist, Marxist, and he's an anti-American in every way, shape, and form. So what does it say about the modern Democrat Party that a Marxist socialist is garnering 25% of support? This country has political cancer. It's not fatal. It can be treated, and the constitutional republic can still fully recover. However, if Sanders or Clinton is somehow elected to the White House, that initial diagnosis for this 239-year-old experiment that now has political cancer will become terminal.
The useful idiots, the leftists who are idealistically believing in the beauty of Soviet socialist or communist or whatever system, when they get disillusioned, they become the worst enemies. They are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades. It's the same pattern everywhere. The moment they serve their purpose, all the useful idiots are either be executed entirely, all the idealistically minded Marxists, or exiled or put in prisons, like in Cuba. Many former Marxists are in Cuba. In prison. Ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. So basically America is stuck with demoralization, and unless, even if you start right now, here, this minute, you start educating new generation of Americans, it will still take you 15 to 20 years to turn the tide of ideological perception of reality back to normalcy and patriotism. The influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast.
Sanders, you said you want to rid the planet of ISIS. In the previous debate, you said the greatest threat to national security was climate change. Do you still believe that?
Absolutely. In fact, climate change is directly related to the growth of terrorism.
A reporter asked Democrat presidential candidate Bernie Sanders if 90% tax is obviously too high. He replied with an immediate no.
On the other hand, Mr. Sanders says 90%. Asked whether that's too much, he says no. He says it's obscene that almost all the income generated today goes to the top 1% of people. But you know what? We know what happened in France when they brought in the super tax.
That's right.
Everyone dumped their passports and wanted to get to Belgium where it's more tax-friendly. Gerard Depardieu, he became a Russian.
Right, he did. I think there's a moral element here.
Yes.
I don't think any government anywhere, regardless of how much you make, should take more than half of your income in income taxes.
It's ridiculous.
That is terrible.
Yeah.
90%. That means if you earn over $400,000 a year in America, you're starting to pay the top tax rate, which at the moment is around 43% with surcharges. He wants to say that every $1 over $400,000 that you make, the government will take 90 cents.
That's
just like that.
insane.
You get 10 cents, he takes 90 cents.
Yeah, do you know how much money is going to leave this country?
Where's the morality of
There
this?
is no morality. It's ridiculous.
What about strivers, people who work hard, build themselves up from nothing?
Yep, create jobs, build businesses, contribute to the prosperity of this economy.
They have ruined incentives to be productive. They've violated property rights. They've confiscated property. So they have taken away the incentive for companies to be there. So if you can't keep the fruits of your labor, what incentive is there to build a productive economy?
Or the communist Bernie Sanders, the loser bum. That loser bum. Every time I see a broken car riding by with a distorted face on it, says, "Go Bernie." I know what they are. A bum. A ne'er-do-well into his late 30s who didn't earn a dime. A bum. Lived off his family till he was in his 30s, failed at everything. An angry radical spritzer, an agitator who never accomplished anything. Then he has a child out of wedlock. Well, that's the norm in America today. That makes him even a better candidate to those with broken cars. Then he tries carpentry, but he couldn't even hammer a nail correctly. A friend told Politico magazine he was a terrible carpenter. His carpentry was not going to support him and didn't. Then he tried his hand freelancing for leftist rags, writing about masturbation and rape, I'm quoting now, for $50 a story. So he was a bum. But they said the only thing that Bernie Sanders was good at was talking and talking and talking about socialism and how the rich were ripping everybody else off. All he talked about was the redistribution of wealth. And the rest is history. This worthless loser bum is now being taken seriously by all the worthless loser bums in America.
On the other side of the aisle is an overt, low-life, street socialist, communist, terrible loser professional agitator like Bernie Sanders, a guy who doesn't even believe he's getting this kind of attention. A left-wing fanatic that if you ever saw him, you'd say, who is that man? Call the police. He looks like a vagrant. Now, all of a sudden, he was like the college professor that you had who for 3 hours harangued you about America and then made you feel guilty about white privilege. That's Bernie Sanders. It's unbelievable to me. A communist from his dirty toenails to his dandruff. His dandruff flakes are socialistic. That's how bad this guy is.
How would you define socialism?
I mean, honestly, that definition gets thrown around a lot.
How would you view what socialism is, though? Economically, what is socialism?
Economically, So, I'm gonna have to think about that for a second.
I guess just specifically just, getting rid of that wealth gap in the United States.
How would I describe it as little words possible?
How would you define socialism?
I mean, it's definitely more of an open form of government, and it feels like a lot more accessible to a lot more people, and that's kind of how I see it, like being more accessible and more kind of like equal ground.
What does that mean necessarily, though?
To be quite honest, I don't know.
Is socialism a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I think people kind of throw that word around to try to scare you.
It could really benefit our country in the future.
I think it's a good idea.
Trying to spread the wealth is definitely a good thing in America, and it's definitely a thing that's needed.
This House believes that socialism does not work. Mr. President, socialism is an ideology that has always led to the absolute opposite of what its proponents claim they wish to achieve. Far from ending poverty, socialism creates poverty. Instead of upholding freedom, socialism destroys the very liberty that our forebears fought and died to defend. Socialists always hand power from the people to the state. They spend money they do not have, create a culture of dependency rather than self-reliance, undermine traditions, conventions and institutions that have stood the test of time. And when things go pear-shaped, as they always do, socialists usually resort to the power and might of the state against the people themselves. It was the words of wisdom spoken by President Abraham Lincoln, which I believe best illustrates the fundamental flaws contained within the ideology of socialism, when he said that you cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. You cannot help the poor by destroying the rich. You cannot further the brotherhood of man by inciting class hatred. You cannot build character and courage by destroying men's initiative and independence. And you cannot help men permanently by doing for them what they could and should do for themselves. These very words, Mr. President, inspired Margaret Thatcher, so much that she always carried them around with her. And she, of course, was the person that fought to end Britain's post-war experiment with socialism that had, by the 1970s, brought our great nation to its knees. I grew up in the 1970s, and throughout that period, I witnessed the failures and the catastrophe caused by socialist thinking, which had such a detrimental effect on ordinary working people, the very people that socialist ideas were meant to help. Now, a cruel deception lies embedded in socialism's promises of equality for all, free and extensive public services, and even the spread of wealth among other nations are in principle the desires, of course, of all politicians. We all want to see those things. But of course, I understand how these objectives may appeal to most people. But there is, sadly, one problem with all of that. Put bluntly, it's claptrap, it's balderdash, it's bunkum, doesn't work. Socialism, indeed, doesn't work. It has never worked, and however many governments and however many nations try these experiments, they always end in failure. Let's take Jamaica as a case in point, where a socialist movement there promised so much, but delivered nothing more than total economic collapse and handed deeper poverty back to those whom they pledged to make richer. The heightening inflation of 1973, leading to an unforgiving recession a year later, was directly influenced by the flawed policies of socialism. I'm a Prime Minister of Jamaica who served between 1980 and 89, and I asked him why Jamaica had gone from being the most prosperous Caribbean nation to a basket case. And he answered simply, we dabbled in socialism. Socialists pledge to give so much to society, yet it is the empty promises made by them which in the end leave the poor even poorer. As our greatest Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, once said, the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. And also, socialism, I believe, has a sinister side as well. So often in recent history, we have seen socialism lead to the misery of dictatorship and totalitarianism. It is undeniable that in the last century, socialism has also played a part in the formation of evil dictatorships, whether communist, Marxist, Leninist, or other forms of state-control socialism. Today, we still see countries all over the world who remain so far behind the nations of the capitalist free world due to socialist ideology that has led to their ruination. There is no better example example of that than Zimbabwe, once the breadbasket of Africa, now destroyed by socialist megalomania. And today, Mr. President, we can also see, just over the English Channel, how flawed socialism is, as has been shown in France under President Hollande. With the introduction of the 70% tax rate, he has discouraged wealth creators, causing an exodus in enterprise and investment. So you see, Mr. President, socialism is simply counterproductive and almost always leads to the suffering and misery of the people, and even sometimes the establishment of the cruelest regimes the world has ever seen. Mr. President, socialism simply doesn't work. As Sir Winston Churchill so rightly observed, socialism is the philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy. I beg to support the motion.
I watched Hillary last night with, we're going to give this, we're going to give that, we're going to give that. The poor woman, she's got to give everything away because this maniac that was standing on her right is giving everything away, so she's following. That's what's happening. This socialist slash communist, okay, nobody wants to say it. She's standing there listening to this guy. He's going to tax you people at 90%. He's going to take everything. And nobody's heard the term communist. But you know what? I call him a socialist slash communist, okay? Because that's what he is.
Well, she's got a problem. She's got a maniac on the other side, okay? And she's got...
In Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, he's a maniac. He's a socialist slash communist. I said it yesterday in a speech. So call him what you like. But here's what happened to Hillary. This guy's giving everything away. He wants Social Security for illegal immigrants. He wants education for illegal immigrants. He wants driver's licenses. He wants everything for people that aren't even legally in the country. He wants things, you know, free education for everybody. Anybody who wants to go to school, you get free education. Now, all of this stuff is going to cost trillions of dollars. Trillions. They say 16, 17, 18 trillion dollars. Hillary's standing there listening to this, and she just is getting dragged over, so far over to the left. I watched it the other night. It was embarrassing.
Because almost all of the wealth and much of the income is going to the top 1%.
Stop the tape. Class warfare. Clear class warfare, right out of Karl Marx.
So the three core demands of the National Day of Action are free public college, a cancellation of student debt, and a $15 an hour minimum wage for people who work on the campus.
And how's that going to be paid?
Great question. I mean, you know, so I'm not sure if you're talking on like a national level or at particular schools. I can sort of touch on both. At
well,
my
if you wanted
university,
all that
Northeastern
stuff,
University,
someone asked to pick up the tab. Who would that be?
the 1% of people in society that are hoarding the wealth and really sort of causing a catastrophe that students are facing. I mean, we have a relationship right now where 1% of the population owns more wealth than the 99% combined.
All right, so if the 1%, Kelly, if the 1% just had their taxes raised a few years ago back to almost 40%, then to pay for the health care law, they had them raised another few percentage points. Then they had their deductions limited to raise another couple points, where depending on the state or locality, they're pushing over about 50% in taxes. How much higher do you think? How much more do you think they should pay?
I think enough until we have a system where not 1 in 2 American families are threatened with poverty.
So where do they go? Let's say if you tax them, they're smart folks, these people, these 1% hoarders, right? So if they leave here, then who's going to pay for all this stuff that you want?
If they leave
the country.
I mean, there's always going to be a 1% in the U.S. The U.S. is like the bastion of capitalism and its success, and I think
Do you
that,
think the 1% could pay for all of this?
Absolutely. 85 people in the world hold more wealth than half of the global population.
No, wait a minute.
I mean,
Are we talking about 85 billionaires, or are you extending this to the 1% or whomever who earn a little bit north of $250,000? At what level, Keeley, do you start saying you got to pay a hell of a lot more than you're paying now in taxes?
I mean, I think people earning certainly people earning over $1 million a year should be contributing to the wellness of society.
If it's 50% now, let's say it's around 50% with taxes. We used to have a top rate of 90%. You think we should get back to that?
I mean, I think that eventually we will get back to that. I think
and
eventually.
You're okay with that? Are some of your friends okay with that? Do some of them want to be successful themselves, and they'd be happy when they get to a level, maybe over 200,000, 250,000, they start paying 90% in taxes on that? They'll be happy with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that
Keely,
people,
come on, you're talking to me here. Your friends are going to be happy getting to a point in their career when they can look outside and say, finally, I'm able to pay 90% in taxes.
Obviously, you know, people in your position, you know, don't want to pay 90% in taxes.
I dare say, unless you're high as a kite, you wouldn't volunteer to pay 90%, right? I mean, unless you really did see a considerable bang for the buck and it was worth it, right? But a lot of the times that you realize it's not worth it, and given some of the track records we've seen with government, it doesn't always work, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But the reality is we have to look at the injustice of the system as it exists right now.
Then do you think maybe if everyone paid a little bit more for this, would you pay a little bit more for this, besides the rich, to pay for that it's worth it? That you think these are good goals?
People already are paying for this.
No, I asked it differently. I asked you, would you, Keely, and your friends, and your mom, and your dad, and your family, would they happily pay more to provide all of these benefits you just outlined?
Of course, and we already are.
No. You just said to pay for some of the things you wanted, the rich should pay significantly more than they're paying right now. Now you're telling me...
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Everyone's already paying.
Well, they're not. I mean, now you're saying for these added benefits that you want, and they're fine benefits, don't get me wrong. You think your friends, their parents, your family would be happy to pay a little bit more to provide these guarantees and benefits.
I come from an incredibly working class family, and my family is already on numerous forms of government assistance and is basically scraping by, you know, in order to get me through college. I live in a world and I see a system around me where there's a population that's doing nothing to contribute to the progression of society. Education is really the only way that we have innovation, that we have,
I'm sure you sound very smart. You know what's going on. You mentioned what's going on in the world. You're probably aware what's happening in Greece and these other countries that provided all these benefits and then some, many of which you outlined very nicely here for us today. And they're going broke and they're out of money. And they don't know what to do. And their people are riding on the streets because they can't believe the money's gone and the benefits and the promises are gone.
Right.
What do you think?
I mean, yeah, there's a global catastrophe right now of complete defunding of social services and
because
defunding
they ran out of money.
Of public.
You know what happened, Keely? They just ran out of money.
Yeah.
Right?
I understand, but there is a 1% in Greece. There's a 1% in the United States. There's a 1%. There's a ruling class in absolutely every.
I don't doubt there is, Keely. I don't doubt there is, but obviously they've been trying to tap them to get money from, and they realize either they don't have the money or they hid from the money. They're gone. They're gone.
Yeah.
And now these countries are going
bust.
Those
people need to be accountable.
All right, fine, but they're smart and they're scurrying all over the globe. So now even if
they are, and that's a problem.
All right, but they've done studies on this, Keely. I don't want to get boring here. But even if you were to take the 1% and take all of their money, tax it 100%, do you know that couldn't keep Medicare, just Medicare in this country going for 3 years? Did you know that?
If we're to a point where the rich is paying 100% on their taxes, then we're on the road to socialism, and we're going to have a completely different type of public infrastructure.
No, what I told you is that even if you took all the money from the rich who you say are getting away with murder, and you took it all away, it wouldn't support one entitlement in this country for 3 years.
I don't believe that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just don't. That sounds completely ludicrous to me.
Do you know how much it will cost to mandate a $15 minimum wage across the country, to have everyone's student loan debt paid off, to pay for public college for everyone?
How much?
You have a rough idea on the cost of just the educational part, on the student loan part and the public college part?
Absolutely. $1.3 trillion in student debt. That's just a beginning. And then billions and billions of dollars.
Do you know how much you get fully taxing the 1%? 100%.
I don't know. Is it close to the number, the $16 trillion that we spent to bail out the banks
hear what I'm saying, because I just want
2008?
this to be a math reminder. $1 trillion, which would barely keep Medicare going for 3 years. That's one area. Even if we repositioned it to go into this area that you want, we don't have enough to do it. So you're going to have to find other means of getting money, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a starting point. I mean, I think that all of these things require really comprehensive programs.
No doubt, no doubt. But do you fear, Keely, I guess what I'm asking you, you're passionate about this, and I admire that passion and your involvement in this, but I think you have to step back and look at the numbers that could be involved here, because they're going to be huge. Right. And a lot of those, a college behind you and institutions behind you, knowing that student debt is taken care of, it's forgiven and done, do you think any of those guys, any of those administrators, any of those schools aren't going to leap at the opportunity to gouge even more, to raise tuitions even more, to raise room and board even more?
Well, I mean, ideally, if we have a big enough mass movement of people in the streets, we can actually prevent things like that from happening.
Brian, Cleveland, you're on the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm a socialist. I believe in socialism. And
well, of course you do. You're a loser who can't make anything on his own, so you want it from me. What else is new?
Do you know how much money Bill Gates has? I mean, he doesn't.
Well, who'd he take it from, you?
He doesn't need $55 billion.
What do you mean he doesn't need it? Who'd he take it from, you?
He didn't take it. He didn't take it from anybody.
How much in taxes do you think he pays a year?
Oh, I have no idea.
Of course you have no idea, because you're a dummy. How could you have an idea? He pays, and so do the people who make more than $1 million a year, about 90% of all the federal income tax in this country. Did you know that? Without us, you'd wind up eating mites in the street.
Do you know how much food corporations waste, like Procter & Gamble, when they make
food? You're telling me there are skinny homeless people in America who are starving to death? Have you ever taken a look at the people on welfare lately, the size of them?
You can take that.
They're fat as horses because they have too much to eat and not enough to do but knock out babies and collect welfare. What are you talking about? Let me repeat the hard data, my friend. The people who earn over $1 million a year support men like you. Have a nice day. 3 in a row now. Let's go for a 10-pin shot. They don't like it. They want of course they want socialism. Wouldn't you want socialism if you were either genetically damaged or you were a drunk or an alcoholic or a drug addict or stupid or lazy? You see, they don't like when they hear reality. But when they hear the realities and they have to look nakedly at the statistics, of course they're going to get mad at me. I have told you before, sometimes medicine tastes lousy. In fact, good medicine always tastes lousy. Old Doc Savage gives you the pill that you need in order to get straight. That pill tastes lousy. I don't sugarcoat my words. You want sugarcoating? Go to Hillary or Obama.
Savage. Some of which make billions in profit, pay nothing in taxes. They are not to be asked for 1 cent of sacrifice in deficit reduction. Just working families, just children, just the elderly, just the sick.
That's the only overt member, a socialist member of Congress, none other than the senator from Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, who makes believe he's from Vermont, Bernie Sanders. The fact of the matter is we actually looked up Bernie Sanders' donor list. We'll have that for you a little later. You'll find out that he's talking through his rear end because he receives a great deal of money from the Teamsters Union, the National Education Association, United Auto Workers, the AFL-CIO. I have the whole list. The Service Employees International Union, MoveOn.org, American Wind Energy Association. He is one of the most despicable people to have ever inhabited a Senate seat. In fact, when he leaves that Senate seat, I would have it sterilized. Right?
I presume this is to enable us to sweep Britain clean of socialism.
But let me make a broader point on taxes, which is many times in this debate, Bernie has talked about providing health care for free from the government. You know what? The simplest principle in economics is Tonstoffel. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. The liberal-leaning Urban Institute scored Bernie's health plan, concluded it would cost $2.5 trillion in the first year and $32 trillion over 10 years. Now, how much is that? Trillions is a big number. It's not clear what that is. Let me put it in perspective. All of the federal income taxes we pay today are about $1.5 trillion a year. $2.5 trillion means every one of us paying income taxes would have to about triple what you pay in income taxes to get an additional $2.5 trillion. Now, Bernie, no doubt, is going to come back and say, no, 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 no. None of you are going to pay. Just the rich. Well, how about if we took every person that makes over $1 million a year and confiscated 100% of their income, took every penny that they make? That would raise only enough money to fund Bernie's plan for 5 months. Here's another idea. How about if the government confiscated the assets of Apple, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and ExxonMobil? If it came in, illegally seized those companies and sold them, that would pay for 1 year of Bernie's plan. If you don't want to see your taxes triple, in addition to the wait list, in addition to the rationing, in addition to fewer MRIs and mammograms to worse care, then you don't want to see Bernie's Medicaid for all. You want to see cheap, affordable health care that you can choose, that puts you in control.
Eileen from WABC has a good question. Eileen, what's your question? Welcome to the program.
Thank you for talking about socialism. Could you please educate us on when we cross from socialism into Marxism and how we can identify it in our living times right now and how dangerous it actually is? And that
socialism advocates the public ownership of property and all natural resources rather than private ownership. That's how it starts. The socialist system of government espouses cooperation over the competitiveness of a free market economy. They assume that if the government intervenes, everyone will get along and everything will be equal. Of course, it never has worked out like that, ever. It never has. They believe that all people in society contribute to the production of goods and services, and all these goods should be shared equally. Doesn't that make sense to you if you're a college teacher at Columbia and never worked in the real world and never had to apply for a permit to sell a souvlaki on the streets of New York? The opposite is the capitalist system, in which the individual, the person, trumps the collective, and the free market determines the distribution of goods. Meaning, if more people want a hot dog in the streets of New York, more carts will appear with hot dogs on them. If people don't want hot dogs and they want tofu dogs, hot dogs are no longer popular and they stop being made and sold. That's capitalism. Now, examples of socialist policies include a so-called living wage, minimum wage, free higher education. Now, how's that worked out, free higher education? Have you seen the goons in the colleges now? Have you seen what they're teaching now? They're teaching don't use he, don't use her, don't use she, don't use Mr., don't use Mrs. Now they're going after masculinity. Now they don't want sports on colleges. The radical lesbian feminists are really wonderful at education, aren't they? Another example of socialist policies would be Obamacare. Clearly unadulterated, pure, unadulterated socialism bordering on Marxism. Socialists say that capitalism creates inequality. Well, does it now, or is that people create inequality because people are unequal? Doesn't it make sense to you that some people are more talented than others and are willing to work harder than others? Are you telling me that the millions of bums in this country who don't work are not working because they could work? No, they're not working because Obama has given them a handout. He's given them fish instead of a fishing rod. And so that's what socialism is. Now, what is the difference between communism and socialism? Communism calls not only for public ownership of property and natural resources, but for the means of production of goods and services. That means they own all the industries, like in North Korea. They own steel, they own the internet, etc. And the theory was from this crackpot Karl Marx, this lunatic, anti-human being Karl Marx. Well, you know, he was a nut who hated everybody because he was a failure. Like an example of Karl Marx would be Bernie Sanders, another loser on life's stage, who thinks that people who are better than him, quicker than him, faster than him, people who are better looking with better wives and nicer shoes and better cars are stealing it from him. That's an example of Bernie Sanders' mentality, who argues that capitalism divides people because of competition. No, Bernie, that's why the NFL works, because the better athletes can be seen right before your eyes, Bernie.
Well, you're in the 1%, and we're in the 99%.
Well, wouldn't you like to get into the 1%? You don't want more money? You don't want... If I offered to put you in the 1% right now, you'd turn it down?
And I would pay my share and get rid of the Bush tax cuts immediately. Immediately.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Just like Warren Buffett and his secretary.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question.
So that these folks could pay their student
Let me ask you a
loans,
question.
could get off of food stamps, could be successful.
Let me ask you a question.
Just like you. What are you driving?
Hold on.
They don't have a
Hold
car.
on. What do you think my share is? What percent of my income do you think would be fair?
Get rid of the Bush tax.
No. Just give me a percentage.
No.
0.5%. What percent?
Marginal.
So you think it? Hold on. What do you think? What do you think would be fair for me to pay? What do you think is fair?
National average runs close to 17%. A whole bunch of people, about 50%.
Okay, but how much do you think I should pay? What would be fair for me?
I don't know what your
Just
income
guess.
is. I can't tell you that.
Well, what do you?
I believe in a
How about the same as everybody else? What should I pay? Okay, well, all right, I'm paying 35%. All right, well, that would be a huge tax cut for me. I pay much more than 35% of my total income in tax.
What do you think of the
Less than me, and I employed her.
15%.
I am giving the government half of what I earn. You think they should take more?
I think we should get rid of the Bush tax cuts.
But that means I would be paying more than half of what I earn in the government.
There's no way you can put all the expenses you want without increasing revenue. There's no way to fix
And meanwhile, if you raise my taxes, maybe I'll just decide to sell my business and fire 150 people. Why should I work for free?
You've got 20,000 clients. You're doing much better than anyone else here.
But why should I?
Anyone else here?
Do you think? Wait, hold on.
You should want to share your success.
No. Do you think I should work for you or for myself?
Well, I'm like you. I'm an entrepreneur. I want you to work for yourself.
Right, but if the government...
I want you to... But you started out with 2 clients before you had 20,000. You should want to help the next guy.
I am helping the next guy.
Well,
I'm helping them. I'm helping my clients by giving them services that they want. I'm employing 150 people. How many people do you employ?
I'm in the mortgage business. I wish I employed 150 people.
Well, let's stop. Well, go do it.
The problem is...
I'm doing it. I'm doing my share. Why aren't you doing yours?
Unregulated.
And in fact, I'm probably paying more income taxes than everybody around me combined. So I'm paying more than my fair share right now. So I'm picking up the slack for a lot of people.
The other thing I want to say is that socialism is democracy, and socialism is Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Buddhism, because all the great religions say essentially the same thing that Marx said.
The Marxist-Leninist worldview is very well developed. Its theology is atheism, and its sociology calls for the abolition of the home, church, and state. Fyodor Dostoevsky recognized the basic flaw of Marxism many years ago. Dostoevsky: the problem of communism is not an economic problem. The problem of communism is the problem of atheism. Atheism lies at the heart of the Marxist-Leninist worldview. Marx: it is clear as the sun and evident as the day that there is no God, and still more, that there can be no God. Marx was an atheist before his socialistic beliefs were finally formed. His work in the field of philosophy emphasized his hatred of all the gods. Later, he proclaimed that belief in God was a narcotic. Marx's atheism shaped his communist theory. He believed that religion is merely an antidepressant for the oppressed working class. Marx: religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the sentiment of a heartless world. It is the opium of the people. Later, Lenin agreed with the sentiments of Marx and Engels. The philosophical basis of Marxism is absolutely atheistic and positively hostile to all religion. Every religious idea, every idea of God, even flirting with the idea of God, is unutterable vileness.
I think I know why you don't like Mother Teresa, but I think you really should be man enough to tell the audience some of your more despicable comments. So since you weren't, I'll do it for you. These are Christopher Hitchens' words. Mother Teresa, in regard to her opposition to abortion, he said, quote, "It sounds grotesque when uttered by an elderly virgin." She has also been regarded as a presumable virgin, and you've also referred to as an elderly virgins terrified of sex should not tell the rest of us how to live our sex lives. So that's really the kind of individual you are, Christopher. So don't give me the stuff about Duvalier. Now, why is she such a threat to you? All right. You see, both Christopher Hitchens and Mother Teresa had one thing in common. They both professed to have something in common with regard to the poor. They both said they were concerned about the poor. Unlike Mr. Hitchens, Mother Teresa actually did something about the poor. So she... Well, what's bothering him is that here's a woman engaged in private philanthropy, grounded in her Catholic tradition, and you, sir, you want state socialism. That is why she terrifies you, and she continues to terrify you. You want coercion, and Mother Teresa, of course, chose altruism. You know, if you're going to write a book, too, you really have to do it in a scholarly fashion. For example, this is a scholarly work. This is a book which I wrote, okay? This is a piece of trash. This is a book which you wrote. Now, why would I say that? This is the Mother Teresa book, not because of the content. He has the freedom of speech. When you write a book, if you're going to be taken seriously, it's always helpful to have an index, okay? You don't have any index. Yours is 8.5 by 5.5, 98 pages. But more importantly, there's something called footnotes, which go at the foot of the page, or endnotes, which go at the end of the chapter. If you take a look at my book, you have 1,060 attributions. It's called evidence, Christopher, and we open up your book and we don't find any. Now that, you see, if you were one of my undergraduate students, that would have to merit an F. I'm sorry. It doesn't carry any weight. You know, the reason why you really don't like Mother Teresa, you say she takes from the rich in your book, and she gives from the poor. Well, who the hell did you expect her to take it from? The poor? I mean, what kind of a mentality is this, you know? She visits dictatorships, so does the Red Cross. And what do you have against dictatorships anyhow, sir? You have been in love with the Marxists all over Latin America. But most amazing, in your book you say that Calcutta needs population control. But on the page before, you actually say that secular leftist politics predominates. Didn't you quite figure out the cause and effect? In social science, it's called an independent variable and a dependent variable. Didn't you quite figure out that the reason they have so much poverty over there is precisely because of your secular leftist politics, which predominates? Where in God's name has socialism ever delivered anything but what Orwell said? Leader worship, oppression, and war. That's the legacy of what you stand for. I mean, after all, it is the philosophy of The Nation magazine, is yours as a Marxism. It is the most failed philosophy in all of history. You've been on the wrong side of history. Marxism is what is, you talk about apologies. You don't want to apologize for anything. There are more people dead in the 20th century as a result of what government has done than what any religion has done. 120 million people lost their lives. It's called communism. Now, if you don't make this, Christopher, you want to make the argument that somehow there's a distinction here, that you as a Marxist, as an intellectual, are somehow distant from the behavioral consequences of your philosophy. Well, it won't work. Remember what Solzhenitsyn said about Stalinism and Marxism? He said, Stalin didn't pervert Marxism, it perfected it. And that's exactly what happens. You cannot have a socialist regime without the kind of poverty which then people must, like Mother Teresa, have to rescue the people from. What you are doing is sponsoring an ideology which ultimately leads to the kind of oppression that you supposedly abhor.
Chavez strode the world, inspiration to all of us, fighting back against austerity and neoliberal economics in Europe, showed us there is a different and a better way of doing things. It's called socialism, it's called social justice, and it's something that Venezuela has made a big step towards.
Bernie Sanders, Sean Penn, Harry Belafonte, Danny Glover, Michael Moore, Kevin Spacey, Susan Sarandon, Oliver Stone, Naomi Campbell, all of them have supported the Chavistas and Maduro.
My friend, President Chavez.
A mi amigo, el presidente Hugo Chávez.
It is only possible to be so inspiring as he is.
That it's related to socialism.
Do you know how bad it is, the cover-up? You say, oh, there's no fake news. It's all fake news. That's how a Rothschild banker named Macaroni can win in France when the morons on the left, the unwashed drug addicts, the immigrants, think that he's going to do something for them. He's a central banker, you schmucks. The same with this Venezuela thing. I warned you what it was. Now, who supported this country's slide into socialism? Sean Penn. When is the last time Sean Penn was straight? Does anyone know? Can anyone tell me definitively the last time he gave a speech or a talk or wrote an article that he actually could know what he's talking about? Oliver Stoner supported Hugo Chavez. Danny Glover praised Hugo Chavez at the time. There is more brain matter in my dog's hangnail than in Danny Glover's brain. Here's Danny Glover praising Hugo Chavez, and you thought he was an actor. Listen to this.
So proud to be with you as we commemorate and celebrate a true man of the people. His memory lives with us through the work that you do as citizens of this great nation, as you continue to realize his vision of a participatory democracy,
you can hardly say
one
the
involving
word.
all citizens. In context,
you got the picture. You know, my dog has a wart on his right inner leg. I would suspect that there is more intelligence in the wart than there is in Danny Glover's brain, by what I just heard. They don't even have a salami amongst them to eat. And this moron goes over there and celebrates them for their socialism. You hear?
Look forward to the development of Venezuela, the efficiency of Venezuela in providing good services and decency for all the people of that country. Our solidarity is important, and the best form of solidarity is learning from it. There is an alternative.
La sociedad capitalista, ¿qué es lo que reina? La desigualdad. La desigualdad más irracional, salvaje. Y por tanto la injusticia, y por tanto la violencia social, la explotación del hombre por el hombre, como decía Carlos Marx. El reino de Dios aquí en la tierra es el socialismo.
Amén.
Bread, medicine, toilet paper. These are just some of the basic necessities Venezuelans are struggling to find. The falling global oil prices have hit the country hard. Public services are disappearing one after the other. American officials are warning the country is on the brink of collapse.
Venezuela is in a state of emergency right now. Its currency has been devalued 92% since the last 2 years alone.
The amount of hyperinflation here is actually just unbelievable. You need a backpack full of money to buy a dinner.
Venezuela bet everything on the price of oil remaining high. And with government revenue 95% dependent on it, the plunge in oil has sent the economy reeling. As a result, GDP is predicted to contract 5.8% in 2016, the third straight year of negative growth. And Venezuela has the world's largest inflation rate, the IMF expecting it to reach 700% this year.
Started with a theory that capitalism is bad, a theory that private property and a division of labor is bad. One of the first things Hugo Chavez did was seize the land. He seized over 1,000 industrial enterprises, nationalizing them. He took over the energy grid. He took over the production of oil, which is today the only way that Venezuela generates revenue.
Lines down the block for just basic necessities, line down the blocks for public transportation that is insufficient, you know, and then a lot of people talk about the toilet paper with the government setting up a set price so poor people could afford toilet paper.
Even in the driving rain, Venezuelans started their day in search of food, expecting to see the usual grim queues that form at government stores. Not today. The only stores with affordable food are shut. People walked away empty-handed but full of dread, wondering where their next meal might come from. And here's the thing. These people aren't allowed to come back tomorrow. Food is rationed here, doled out according to the last number on your government ID.
The things that we have experienced, the things that we have seen here in Venezuela are absolutely insane.
We went to some of the restaurants, and all the prices on the menu are in paper, and they like taped onto the menu because they have to change it every week, and sometimes even more than that. It's changing that fast.
Free healthcare was one of the foundations of the Chavez regime.
These are all the bandages we've got, 6 little rolls. And these here are made in China, very poor quality. It tears your skin off.
We've seen food shortages, medicine shortages, now basic services, electricity, even water, that is not reaching a big portion of Venezuela's population.
This is what buying food looks like in Venezuela. Waiting for hours, hoping that by the time one hands in their allotted number, there'll still be food left.
You know, it's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing.
The socialist model has driven the economy basically to the ground. Argentina, Brazil now even. How do you explain that?
You are asking me questions about Latin America, which I am very interested, but right now I'm running for President of the United States.
Beyond policy issues, the Democratic candidate once called Maduro's predecessor, Hugo Chavez, from the same party, a dead communist dictator.
When the Marxists say, well, that wasn't real Marxism, what it really means, and I've thought about this for a long time, it's the most arrogant possible statement anyone could ever make. It means, if I would have been in Stalin's position, I would have ushered in the damn utopia instead of the genocidal massacres, because I understand the doctrine of Marxism and everything about me is good. It's like, well, think again, sunshine. You don't understand it. You don't understand it. And you're not that good. And if the power was in your hands, assuming you had the competence, which you don't, you wouldn't have done any better. And even if you had, there would have been someone else waiting right behind you to shoot you the first time you actually tried to do anything good. And that's what happened to all the old guard who ran the damn revolution. Stalin rounded them all up and shot them, along with their families and millions of other people. So even if you do happen to be that avatar of moral purity that you claim implicitly, the probability that you'd get to act out your goodness in relationship to those possessed by your ideology is zero.
We don't want ownership.
There's no such thing. There should be nobody should own anything.
Common owners, common property.
Okay, nobody should own anything.
So you support communism?
What do you fucking think, dude? Do you understand who you're talking with here? Yes. Do you understand who you're talking with here? Yes. Do you fucking stand? Yes. I am a fucking communist. Okay? And I don't fucking like little pissants like you coming into my fucking city, boasting all your nationalist bullshit.
Well, it certainly doesn't stand for Sanders. Sanders, first of all, was never a Democrat. He was an independent and a socialist. He is not the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And if the Democratic Party moves left toward Sanders, toward Keith Ellison, it's doomed. It has to regain the support from middle Americans in the Rust Belt states, traditional Democrats. You want to call that the status quo? Fine. I call it the vibrant center. I want to return America to the center, where good conservatives and good liberals, centrists, can argue with each other and get the radicals, the extreme leftists like Sanders, marginalized along with the extreme right.
I don't think many people know that only socialists publicly advocated genocide in the 19th, 20th centuries. I think that's a very little known fact, and it seems shocking if you mention it. I've lectured on it here and in other universities, and it's always greeted with a sense of shock. It first appeared in January 1849 in Marx's journal, Neue Rheinische Zeitung. Engels wrote of how the class war in Marxian terms means that when socialist revolution happens, the class war happens, there will be primitive societies in Europe 2 stages behind, because they're not even capitalist yet. And he had in mind the Basques and the Bretons and the Scottish Highlanders and the Serbs, and he calls them racial trash, Abfälle, racial trash, and they will have to be destroyed because being 2 stages behind in the historical struggle, it will be impossible to bring them up to the point of being revolutionary.
The classes and the races, too weak to master the new conditions of life, must give way. They must perish in the revolutionary Holocaust. Karl Marx.
Marx began it. He was the ancestor of modern political genocide, and I don't know that any European thinker of the modern period before Marx and Engels ever publicly advocated racial extermination. I can't find anything earlier, so I presume it starts with them.
The teachings of Marx and Engels were carefully studied by Lenin, the man who established the first Marxist country on earth. 1 year after Lenin's death in 1924, the New York Times published a small article, which at the time went almost unnoticed. It was about some newly established party in Germany. The National Socialist Labour Party, of which Adolf Hitler is patron and father, persists in believing that Lenin and Hitler can be compared. Who's speaking? A certain Dr. Goebbels. On the speaker's assertion that Lenin was the greatest man, second only to Hitler, and that the difference between communism and the Hitler faith was very slight, a faction war opened with whizzing beer glasses. The future Nazi propaganda minister Goebbels was openly declaring that the difference between Lenin's communism and the Hitler faith was very slight.
York, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Yes, I challenge you. There's far less crime and social disruption in the socialist countries than in the United States of
You're
America.
absolutely right. There was less crime in Hitler's socialist paradise, wasn't there?
Wrong. There's plenty of crime. You don't know what you're talking about.
Wait a minute. You just said there was less crime in a socialist country. Hitler had a socialist country called the National Socialists. I mean, you're an educated man. You know what Nazi stands for.
German, German...
Your ignorant talk is not around to criticize you anymore. Let's go to your socialist paradise of Cuba. Of course there's less crime because everyone who criticized it was either put away in a prison or killed. That's the country you want to live in?
You're stupid. Germany was not a socialist country like...
Of course it was, you ignoramus. National Socialism, you fool.
You dimwitted jackass.
Listen, you idiot. Nobody knows who you are. They all know who I am. And they listen to me because they know I back up my statements with facts. You're just an old man who is confused.
Reader, isn't that what you are? You're...
All right, listen, moron. Listen, moron. Hey, listen, old idiot. Listen carefully. Let's forget Nazi Germany. National Socialism, Nazism. You don't understand that, so we'll make it easy for you. You came on this national show and you had the nerve to say there's less crime in socialist countries. Let's go to Cuba. Is that or not a socialist country?
Yes.
And there's less crime, is that correct?
Yes, in the United States...
Well, stop for a minute. Try to use the few brain cells you have left. Why do you think there's less crime in Cuba?
Because they have socialism there. The United States has got more...
Sir, you just said less socialism when you're saying there's less crime in socialist countries. What are you saying?
If I said that, I'm mistaken. They have less crime because they have socialism.
Well, where do you think the protesters are in Cuba?
Well, let me ask you this.
No, don't ask a question. I just asked you a question. You said there's less crime in Cuba, and I agree with you. Why do you think there's less crime in Cuba than here?
Because they have...
Because anybody who raises their voice is put into prison or shot. Do you understand that?
No, I don't understand that, and that's all right.
Well, that's because you're an ignorant old union member. What'd you do all your life? What union were you in? You idiot, you. You uneducated fool. It's dangerous fools like you who are destroying America.
America's got 2,300,000 people.
Go gargle with Rogaine, will you? Grow some hair on your throat. Maybe it'll do you some good. Go gargle with Rogaine so we don't have to listen to you again, you idiot, you. Less crime in a socialist country. Of course there's less crime in a socialist country. Because it's a fascist dictatorship. Then he says to me, Hitler's Germany was not a socialist country. When the initials of Nazi means National Socialism. But none of the leftists want to acknowledge that both Stalin and Hitler were the same. They were different sides of the same devilish coin. But go tell that to the brainwashed masses.
Do you have a problem with capitalism?
Yes, I do.
What do you want to replace capitalism with?
Socialism.
Where has socialism ever worked?
Look at Cuba right now.
I give way to the honourable gentleman.
There is no doubt that the Prime Minister has in many ways achieved substantial success. There is one statistic that I understand is not, however, challengeable, and that is that over her 11 years, the gap between the richest 10% and the poorest 10% in this country has widened substantially.
That's right.
How can she say at the end of her chapter of British politics that she can justify many people in a constituency such as mine being relatively much poorer off, much less well housed, and much less well provided than it was in 1979? Surely she accepts that is not a record that she or any Prime Minister can be proud of.
Mr. Speaker, all levels of income are better off than they were in 1979. But what the honourable member is saying is that he would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That way you will never create the wealth for better social services as we have. And what a policy! Yes, he would rather have the poor poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That is the Liberal policy. Yes, it came out. He didn't intend it to, but he did. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm extremely grateful. The Prime Minister is aware that I detest every single one of her domestic policies and have never hid that.
And I think that the honourable gentleman knows that I have the same contempt for his socialist policies as the people of East Europe who have experienced it have it for theirs. I think I must have hit the right nail on the head when I pointed out that the logic of those policies are they'd rather have the poor poorer. Once they start to talk about the gap, they'd rather the gap were that. Down here. That. Not that. But that. So long as the gap is smaller, so long as the gap is smaller, they'd rather have the poor poorer. You do not create wealth and opportunity that way. You do not create a property-owning democracy that way. To the honourable gentleman. Imagine a Labour canvasser talking on the doorstep to those East German families when they settled in on freedom's side of the wall. You want to keep more of the money you earn? I'm afraid that's very selfish. We shall want to tax that away. You want to own shares in your firm? We can't have that. The state has to own your firm. You want to choose where to send your children to school? That's very divisive. You'll send your child where we tell you. Mr. President, the trouble with Labour is that they're just not at home with freedom. Socialists don't like ordinary people choosing, for they might not choose socialism.
My friends, be under no illusions. It is an uphill road we have to tread. But if we reject the narrow, cramping doctrines of socialism, we shall surely find the way